protesting. We were doing this against the same people who just shift around in different seats. And I got tired of being sold a lot of dreams. And when they get into office, those dreams fall flat. The emails stop being answered. The phone calls stop being answered. And that was why I decided to run. I think it's time that we start to elect individuals who have been advocates for the community, who are not self-serving, who are looking to provide relief. We're looking to provide resolutions for all residents of Hillsborough County.
Okay, thank you. And if people want more info, where can they find it?
They can go on my website. It's skyuwhite.com. They can also follow me on Facebook. I post all of my events, where I'm attending, where we'll be door knocking, and they can also give me a call. I personally answer all of my phone calls and emails. Skyuwhite.com. My email is electskyuwhite.
Thank you. My family has been in Hillsborough County a long time also, kind of like Mark's, since the turn of the century, when my grandfather had the nerve to cross Sicily, get on a boat and come over here. And that was in 1906. I've always loved Tampa. I've lived in other places, and I think that has made me really respect the kind of community we have. The most exciting thing I find of this community is the diversity. We're not like other southern cities. The only other southern city like Tampa is New Orleans, where you always had an ethnic mix of people. You always had different people working together in the cigar industry, which my family worked in. That was totally unique in the South. And I think that's what makes us special here, to provide that kind of foundation. I was raised out in Riverview. I understand prejudice, being in the only one of two Catholic families that lived there. Had to go to school in Ybor City with my dad, drove with him every day. Catholics weren't real welcome there as other groups. I specifically remember an incident where the Klan was burning crosses in 1958 near our house on Highway 301. And my mother reminded me, using the term Negroes at that time, remember, we're next in line of people they hate, which always made me identify with what it's like to be an outsider. And I've carried that kind of thing with me throughout my life for that and other reasons too. I also happen to be the shortest kid in school from kindergarten to junior in high school. And everything that implies about how to negotiate and how to figure out how to get things done, which I hear people say, speak truth to power. I'd rather get alliances and ideas to power and get them to do it in another way, because obviously simply fighting with people doesn't always win, and it certainly doesn't win in my situation. So my skills are more negotiating, getting things done in a roundabout way. I've been executive director of the Planning Commission, the Hillsborough MPO, and TBARTA, the Regional Transportation Authority. Transportation is definitely my number one issue, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later. But that's why I got involved. We need to make the right decisions. I'm excited about where we are. We're about to go to the next level. Let's do it right.
Okay, and if folks want more information?
Thank you. Yes, rayforhillsborough.com is my website.
All right, awesome. And we have Kim Overman.
Hi, how are you? Hi, I'm Kimberly Overman. I am running for County Commission countywide along with my wonderful colleagues here. I have moved to the Tampa Bay area 34 years ago from the Washington, D.C. area. Previously, I'd lived in Louisiana, I lived in Texas, was born in New York. Traveled around, moved 19 times before I moved here, and when I moved here, I made Hillsborough County my home. Raised two sons here, have 3 grandchildren, and started a business 20 years ago, helping people make financial decisions, see where they wanted to go, develop the analysis to determine how to best get there, and then develop the steps and help them implement those steps. Watching and working as a volunteer for about 30 years or so in a variety of different organizations, whether that be being appointed by Phyllis Puzanski to the Housing and Finance Authority that oversaw the bonds for housing in our area to allow for first-time home buyers to be able to afford a home. In addition to that, acted as a CAC, or Citizens Advisory Committee member, and chair, ultimately, to the City of Tampa's Budget and Finance, to help them in making good financial decisions to make sure the employees had what they needed to provide good services to our citizens. And then currently I'm on the Citizens Advisory Committee to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which actually advises the county as well as the other agencies within Hillsborough County on various issues associated with transportation. I spent many years working on the TBX, stopping the interstate from destroying our inner city, as well as many of our urban communities, in terms of road widening and finding a better way so that people can get around. And what I found being on the CAC is that we were not listening to the citizens that are volunteering for their time. So I felt the best way to get that done, to address affordable housing as well as transit and transportation planning so that our citizens can get to work and take care of their families, was to get in the chair. I've worked alongside of government for a long time, lots of nonprofits and volunteering as I'm a serial volunteer, but I've advocated for citizens' rights for most of my life, especially arriving into Washington, D.C. right after the race riots, and recognize how important it is to pay attention to all the people of our community. My website is vote4kim.com. There you can find more information about all the volunteer activities I've done, have a good understanding of the business that I own as a woman-owned business, and either volunteer or contribute to be on the team, because I think it is going to take a team effort for us to take Hillsborough County forward.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you all so much for those opening remarks. Let's dive right on into the questions here. And I guess we'll start again with you, Kim.
Okay.
Okay. What is the most important issue affecting all Hillsborough County residents currently, and how would you suggest resolving it? And we ask that you be brief in your answers.
Well, you have big problems and it's hard to be brief. But I will say this. I think one of the challenges we have is we have not helped people get to work. By not investing in our infrastructure, creating transit. I rode a bus when I was in 5th grade and able to go anywhere I needed it to go. We don't have citizens in our county that have that as an alternative to spending the $5 an hour of their wage that it takes to own a car. By investing in our transit, we're going to be able to actually provide them with the resources they need to have an alternative so that they can competitively take care of their families and build net worth within themselves and to be able to afford a home. And when we sprawl all over the county and can't provide services, we have not, in my opinion, we violated the public trust. And that's our biggest problem.
Okay, thank you. Mark Nash.
Thank you, Kenya. I think it's obvious to everybody that lives not only in our county, but our region, and you could even say statewide, that transportation is not only our best opportunity to improve the quality of life for the people in this county, but it's an economic necessity that we do so. If we can't move around, if people can't get to their jobs, then we're behind the economic 8 ball. I've spoken to many citizens during this election cycle, and people moving here found a job 8 miles from their house, and the bus ride to get them to and from their work, it would be 2 hours each way. That is just unacceptable. We know about a year and a half ago, a study was put out that says that Hillsborough County spends on transportation, on our bus service, the same amount that is spent in Macon, Georgia, and Sheboygan, Wisconsin. We have 1.4 million people in our county. We're expecting another 600,000 plus here by 2030 to get us to 2 million. Can you imagine driving our roads, taking the buses and the bus routes we have today in this community under those circumstances? I mean, I simply cannot. And so transit, it affects our economic opportunity. We have affordable housing issues in this county. A lot of people are struggling to pay the skyrocketing rents that are plaguing everyone trying to find a place to live. Tired of seeing trash on our roadways. That right there could be a lifetime spent in the Hillsborough County Commission. But transit's number one, and other pieces of the puzzle fall into place when we properly address our transportation needs.
Okay. Sky U. White.
This is Sky U. White. Two of the biggest things that we need to work on in Hillsborough County is housing and transportation. We can't work on one without working on the other. My opinion, with housing being number one, and that's because we have working class citizens that's finding it hard to live in, finding it hard to rent or even buy a home. My personal experience, I was renting last year, but my rent jumped $400 in 1 month upon my renewal, and I found it cheaper to just buy a home. So now I own a home and it's cheaper to rent. But when you have working class citizens, I'm a nurse, I work with other nurses who are only making $18, $19 an hour, and the average income is a little over $50,000, but the average rent is almost $1,500 for a studio apartment where I live in South County. That's not feasible. We have millennials who are saddled with student loan debt, just as myself, not making a lot of money, raising small kids, child care, car note, we're not even talking about utilities, and they're struggling to make ends meet. And unless we tackle the affordable housing issue, we will be in an affordable housing crisis. When I talk to these communities, They want to see transportation come to a resolution, but their number one thing is I need to make sure that I'm making rent on the first of the month before I worry about transportation. So we need to make sure that we are providing mixed income for our residents here. We need to make sure that the people who are making $50,000, $55,000, $60,000 a year are able to afford to rent, as well as those who are making $30,000, $25,000 a year. Right now, I think that we have not focused on the working middle class, and we need to tackle the affordable housing in addition to the transportation.
Right.
Basically, I don't agree with. I agree with everything that everybody said so far. And just to add on to it, my number one issue is transit and transportation. I think that's the issue that's going to hold us back. Already, companies are kind of bucking a little bit of the information about what our transit system is like. This does not make us compete well. The other problem is our younger people, especially those without a college education, are forced into having a car and they can't afford it. I have two nephews in that situation. One has a bicycle. If the bus has two bikes on it, guess what? You got to wait for the next bus. You're an hour late for work. You lose your job. It's just something that permeates everybody's life, and it can make housing more affordable if you don't have to have a car and you can actually function. And we haven't been able to do that. I don't think the board has put enough emphasis on that. I mean, come on. We wait like 8 years between referendums to get on the ballot. We should be going back constantly till we get it right, where we get the citizens of our county to vote for that. I believe I have great experience for that. I worked for the Planning Commission for 35 years, ended up being executive director. Also the MPO, I have served on the MPO, CAC, and the Technical Advisory Committee. Transportation's been involved in my whole life, and I feel like with my experience, we can get through this maze and get something that makes sense done for the future.
Okay, great. So all of you pretty much hit on transportation as a pressing issue that you think is most important right now. So that leads right into the next question, where we're talking about the 1 cent sales tax hike. I'm wanting to know, this is something that is expected to generate at least $280 million a year, most of the money going to the Hart to Hillsborough area transit and the rest for road improvement. So I want to know from all the candidates here, what's your position on that?
Okay, my position was
Right.
I'm going to vote for it. You know, it's not perfect. Perfect is the enemy of good, I found in my career, but it's good enough. I think it has enough citizen oversight. I would have liked for it to be more specific. And in all honesty, in a perfect world, I would have liked for the school board and the transportation people to come somehow figure out a plan that might have divided it different. But that doesn't matter. We need to move forward. You know, at this stage, we have been dragging our feet so long. We just got, if we're going in the right direction, we need to do it. It's never going to be perfect and never going to make anybody happy. So I would highly recommend that people do vote for this. In the unfortunate situation that doesn't pass, we need to get right back to work on something that we can take back, hopefully with a county commission that supports it for some other kind of referendum to deal with these issues and not be kicking the can down the road for 8 years in between referendums or whatever we're doing. So I'm in favor of it, and I hope people really think about this, because I think it will solve or at least help our transit problem greatly, and also other problems we have, the people who don't use transit. There's other transportation hotspots in this area, and I think we all know where they are. They need to be addressed.
Okay, Sky?
I echo what Ray said. I did support it. I also signed a petition, as well as handed out some petitions while I was door knocking. It is not perfect. I do have concerns that an increase in sales tax would disproportionately affect the low income residents, but we also need to act on something, because we've spent far too long just planning and planning and planning without any action. So I do support it.
Yeah, thanks, Kenya. So I was at the launch for the All In for Transportation initiative when this got started, and I certainly tip my hat to community leaders, Mr. Morsani and Jeff Innick, who were the economic force behind getting this out and into the public. I was really, a little pessimistic that this was going to happen. We're going to get 50,000 signatures in about 30 days. absolutely phenomenal coordinating and effort by this community to get that forward and get that referendum on the ballot. Quite frankly, if we could all find a way to work together in that period of time and be focused and get things done in this community like that referendum got signed, we would be much further down the road in getting all of the things fixed that need to be fixed in Hillsborough County. Transportation is key. And it's not a liberal or a conservative thing. We have rail in Salt Lake City. We have rail in St. Louis, Missouri. We have rail in Norfolk, Virginia. These are not liberal bastions within the United States of America. These are communities that saw the need that if they were going to be competitive as a community, regionally, nationally, and globally, they needed to up their game. I asked the rhetorical question out on a campaign trail. Name me a global world-class city that doesn't have all the transit options. And the answer is there isn't one. So it's not just about rail. It's about improving our bus system. There's a bus rapid transit idea that's being pushed at the state level that I think it has an opportunity for success here. Our roadways, if you're driving the regular roadways of Hillsborough County, you could lose a tire or a car in the potholes that we have in Hillsborough County. And it's really unfortunate. So it is a big picture transit scenario. And Hillsborough is key to the success of our region. We're the geographic center of the region. We're the economic, we're the education, and we're sadly the transit center of the region. And in order for this region to catch fire, Hillsborough County has to lead the way. We're the heart, the soul, and the center of Tampa Bay. This has got to happen in Hillsborough, and it's something I really look forward to being a part of as your next county commissioner.
Kim?
That was really good, Mike. I like that. I think we're all in agreement that doing something in the area of transit and transit planning, whether that be roads or rail or buses or trolleys or anything, is absolutely necessary in order for us to move forward. How we pay for it has been the issue. We tried to get Hillsborough to go forward, and it wasn't perfect enough. And then we didn't even give voters a chance to vote on it. What's interesting about this scenario is that a group of people got together, like they did to fight TBX, and got together and actually put together a referendum and allowing voters to actually vote on it. Because voters have at least, it's 80,000 signatures they needed a 49. Some of them didn't qualify, but the good news is there was a concerted effort in a short period of time to ask people to get behind the movement. And I think that's what's so critically important. We have been talking about transportation since I got here 34 years ago, and it is time to move the needle. When we look at the fact that we may see an increase in the homestead exemption, that will actually save maybe taxpayers $150. And we look at the median income, and if the citizens of Hillsborough County actually had to pay this extra penny, it might cost them $150. But what they lose in services by losing the homestead and not voting for this is significantly more in terms of government services that we could afford. Raising a penny sales tax isn't the end of the world. We saw gas price go up 14 cents this week, and the world didn't stop. We can make this work. We just have to be good stewards of the money and earn the trust of our citizens by acting transparently and using the money for the right reason.
Okay, awesome. Let's get into talking about the opioid crisis. It's reached epidemic levels here in Florida. Recently, county leaders filed a lawsuit against drug makers asking them to be held responsible and pay out monies to help the county battle the problem. Meanwhile, officials say they'll soon release an action plan to combat this crisis. What are some things the county can do to address it?
The irony of this opioid crisis that we are facing is that, the pharmaceutical industry has allowed this to occur, in the sense that they provided stronger and stronger medications and allowed it to be distributed at a point where it's created an enormous addiction by a lot of people. We do still have a pain problem that we do need to address. And I find it ironic that the voters have actually approved using medical marijuana as a way of managing pain and other anxiety issues, and yet we can't figure out how to have it actually work for our citizens, where they actually have to go to the street to find it because they don't have a distribution center to get to. I think it's smart that we look for solutions and recognize that when people lose hope, frequently a drug addiction is where they end up going. So we have to do a lot of things. We've got to create hope in families. We've got to provide them with strong supports to affect and treat the disease of addiction, and address ways that we can actually address pain management, because that's where this disease stems. And I believe that there's ways to do that, but we haven't really effectively and honestly addressed it because of the money behind both industries.
Okay, Mark.
So before I forget, I want to give a shout out to Sandra L. Jackson. I was in line at a Walgreens on Fletcher last weekend, and she saw my shirt. She talked to me about my campaign, and she said, I'm going to vote for you. And she texted me back and said that she did. So Sandra, thank you for that. I hope you're listening today. So great question, Kenya. I was also at a meeting in Plant City about 10 days ago with the Improvement League. And the opioid problem in our county and our state, quite frankly, is Polk County is about ground zero for this. And there's a lot of issues. But that's starting to bleed over now into the Plant City area. And the folks in the Improvement League in Plant City had a community meeting on this last week. And were voicing concerns to Plant City officials because they're seeing this happen in their community. And then we all saw on the news this week that issue, I believe, in Winter Haven, where there was a bad dose of synthetic marijuana going around, and you had 60, 70, 80 people try it, and everybody started ODing. So this is a critical problem. So I think the county commission's role in this is it's about PSAs. We need to be heightening this issue on the conscience of the awareness factor for our residents of our county. I think our school system should be talking about it in the classroom with their kids. I think our churches should be involved in this conversation. But this is a big, big problem. It's not going to get solved solely by the county commission, but I'd like to think with a $5+ billion budget that we could set some money aside. When they did the Sandy Hook killing, Kevin Beckner, who I was an aide for and worked for him in his first 18 months in office, brought the Safe and Sound program forward to enhance the conversation about safety in our schools. This can be another program that we can put forward to advance the conversation and action on the opioid crisis in our community. So county commission can play a role, but there are other players in this community that should be a part of the conversation and the solution.
Okay, Scott.
This is Scott U. White. This is actually right down my alley since I'm a nurse, and I have witnessed patients come in with pain, and the first thing being prescribed is Vicodin. Also, Vicodin is the cheapest narcotic to obtain. It's only $5 for some people with their insurance versus naproxen. If there's any medical professionals aren't familiar with naproxen, the layman's term of explaining it's kind of like a stronger dose of Tylenol. That is about a $30 to $50 copay. So our narcotics, number one, are cheaper to get, and they're easily prescribed because physicians are put between a rock and a hard place. If your patient comes to you and they say, I am in immense amount of pain, how do you know that they are? How do you know that they're not? Of course, you want your patients to be comfortable. So what do? You can try to give them maybe an extra strength Tylenol. More than likely, they're going to get Vicodin, A, because it's cheaper for their insurance. They may not be able to afford a $50 copay for naproxen. And for two, it will help with the pain. The issue with the opioids is that it definitely becomes addictive. I have witnessed a patient who was on a fentanyl patch, the same drug that unfortunately killed Prince, and he was so addicted he was eating the patch. So I have seen what happens with these opioids. What I would recommend is that as your next county commissioner, working with the health advisory board and seeing what can we do to work with our physicians on providing alternative ways to handle pain before we're prescribing these narcotics. Being that nurse that gets the phone call 15 times a day from a patient who has taken way more Vicodin or OxyContin than they should. I've been on the receiving end of that, and I have seen what these addictions have done, but then I've also seen how patients suffer when they're in pain. So you are stuck between a rock and a hard place, but that's one where we can start is working with our medical professionals, getting their perspective, and working with the health advisory board with county commission.
Right.
Yeah, not much more to say about this other than what strikes me is how long it takes for this community to realize, and even the whole nation, that this is really a serious problem. What we need to do, and this has been talked about too, is part of the problem, in my opinion, with county government is they tend to operate more in silos and kind of watch things happen. They should be working with the school board. They should be working with other counties in the region, as Mark mentioned about Polk County. Our commissioners, I know this for a fact, having worked regionally, they don't even hardly know who the commissioners are in the surrounding counties. So you've got the school board, you've got law enforcement, you've got the health industry, doctors. I mean, this is something that everybody has to get together and look at what the problems are, because I am very concerned about the seriousness of this. And you heard why. I mean, it's so addicting. I mean, you destroy your whole society with stuff like this.
Mhm.
Finally, I think they're waking up, but they've got to work together. It's not going to be just one group that solves it. It's going to be the combination.
And I want to add that from a medical perspective, that the people who are taking these opioids are driving. They're
Mhm.
operating heavy machinery. They're going to school. They're taking care of kids. So something definitely has to be done.
All right, let's switch over to affordable housing. A few of you also brought that up in your opening statements. It's in demand across the county. A lot of residents are paying more than half of their income towards keeping a roof over their heads. And as you all know, there's a constitutional amendment on the ballot that would double the homestead exemption, but that could mean less money for governments to work with to resolve some of these issues like affordable housing. But talk to me about ways that you think the county can commit more money to resolving the issue. Start with Ray.
Sure. I know lots about affordable housing. My son and his wife and my 2 grandsons lived with us for 7 years. They left for a brief period. We thought we'd be empty nesters, downsized, and guess what? My daughter and her husband and my granddaughter live with us now, so we had to upsize again. And and this comes into the cars, because they have to have cars for their jobs, and that doesn't leave enough money for what rent is. And so I get this problem. We need to start, I mean, there's so many things we can do, but part of it is building, in my opinion, more mixed use communities where you have affordable housing mixed in instead of single use subdivisions where, it's all single family houses between this price and this price. I live in a mixed use new urbanist community that has 500 apartments in it. It has a variety of townhouses and different price ranges, things like that. We need to do more of that. We also need to work with developers and private partnerships where they contribute to providing some units of affordability. We have some experience in this in Encore and different projects that we've done. When we displace people that are in affordable housing, we need to make sure that new development that comes in has the number of units to serve those people that were displaced by that at a price that they were paying before. And that's how we need to look at this. We should not be moving people out and not giving them some way to at least have something equal to what they had, or it should be better, really. And so there's a lot of different ways, but we've got to pay attention to this, and we've got to enforce rules for developers that have to do this and be able to provide this type of housing, because it is unbelievable what apartments rent for now. When I ask younger people, or even one of my campaign team, I can't believe what he's paying for like a studio apartment.
It's quite astounding.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Sky.
And I do agree. I've always advocated for mixed use housing since the beginning of my campaign. Perfect example is we do have apartment complexes here that will rent to people who make $30,000 and below. But what about those who make $31,000, $32,000? Where are they going to go? They're stuck paying the $1,400, $1,500 a month rent for these new luxury townhomes being built out in South County where I live. There's 3 of them that are being built within a half of a block radius. $2,300 for a 2-bedroom starting at $2,300. And I actually visited the property last week and asked for a brochure just to be sure if they were offering any specials. And no, it was starting at $2,300 for a 2-bedroom. We have to have mixed use income housing so that our residents have somewhere to live. And in order to do that, just as Ray said, we have to be able to enforce rules on these developers. They come into Hillsborough County, which is prime real estate land, and they're building apartment complexes that a majority of our residents can't afford to live in. And we should not have medical professionals with degrees for people to an apartment complex because that's all that they can afford. So we need to really put into place an ordinance or some sort of rules for our developers to abide by. They're going to build here in Hillsborough County.
Okay. Mark?
So this is much more complicated than just affordable housing. The reason we don't have affordable housing is because we don't have jobs that pay livable wages. So we have a county and a region that has already been identified as the lowest median income region in the entire country. And the three regions at the top of the list, their median incomes are more than double what the Tampa Bay region is. So affordable housing is a result of not having income jobs that pay livable wages so that people can afford to live here. And folks going into apartments are usually young people, perhaps even coming out of college, where they already have nearly six-figure debt because of what they had to pay to be in school in the first place. So affordable housing is related to the income issue. And the developer's role in this, and what the county commission does, is that when they approve development, they also have the ability to approve there being an affordable housing element. They can make sure, in the Northeast, they call it rent control. A lot of people are familiar with the cities in the Northeast, Boston, Philly, New York, DC. There's rent control, and they address this by making it a part of how they approve housing in their communities. The other issue is stop pushing housing so far out into the periphery of our communities, because we don't have transportation for people to be able to get to the job. So we're redeveloping areas of Waimama, we're redeveloping areas of Carver City and Lincoln Gardens right here near the studios, and people can't afford the $250,000 plus cost for the new houses that they're building in communities, while they're pushing minority folks, while they're pushing low-income folks out of their own communities. This is an issue that the city of Tampa can play a role in, but because Hillsborough County governs 2/3 of the geography and the population of Hillsborough County, the greater opportunity to improve this is through your county commission. It will be a priority when I get into office.
Okay.
As Mark alluded to, it's a very complicated issue. We have low income, we have transportation problems, and the general rule of thumb is that your housing cost shouldn't be more than 30% of your income. And with a service economy, we have a very large population of citizens within Hillsborough County that are in an economy that typically doesn't pay more than the median income of the county, which is about $50,000. There is not dollars in families' budgets to be able to afford where builders are pricing new construction in our area. And that is a significant problem. With the anemic set aside for mixed income housing that we currently have as a policy in Hillsborough County is not going to work. The challenge fund that we had in place many, many years ago when I was on the Housing Finance Authority was a start. It helped individuals be able to afford their first home so they could stay in the community of which they lived. But gentrification is a severe problem, because if our policy is to move people in town because we can't afford to provide services out in the county, we are going to have a serious gentrification problem for those communities that have been stable but end up being moved out. During the housing crisis, investment companies came in and bought hundreds of thousands of properties at foreclosure prices, and they're now, not necessarily after they fixed them up in a great deal, but they're now raising the rates to the point where people in their own community can't live there if they have to move out of the place they're in. That rule needs to be overseen. We need to take a look at where we have funds, either in the Sadowski Trust or in the Housing and the County Trust, to be able to support communities and help develop policies to stabilize neighborhoods that are being gentrified as a cost of the rents going up in existing communities. And then create first-time home buyer programs that's aggressive and authentic, because we have one now, but we're getting mixed information for citizens that are looking to try and buy their home. And we have to address that and make sure that people are aware of what resources are out there so they can stay in their neighborhoods.
Okay. Let's jump right to talking about urban sprawl. Some of you have mentioned in your previous comments that part of the problem with a lot of other things, they're kind of domino effect. They're kind of intertwined. People can't get to work or can't live, in areas where it's close to work because they can't afford it, what have you. Talk to me about ways that you could kind of the county could kind of rein in urban sprawl.
So we're going to mix this up just a little bit.
Well, actually, let's start with Ken.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Actually, the interesting part about what I've been doing as a volunteer for so many years is that I've been going to a lot of urban planning meetings, with the ULI as well as Cutter and a variety of other organizations. They're looking for smart ways to develop communities where people can live, work, and play in the same area. We don't have that as a policy. And while we have many, many permits already approved in areas such as in South County that is coming with 30,000 new units possibly on the plan, the ways that the county commission may be able to address the fact that we've already approved the property is that we can affect how they're developed. Putting a bunch of folks in one teardrop area with one road to get out to a major road and one road where all the retail is somewhere else other than where they live is a great way to mess up a community. And that's what we've been doing for the last 15 years. We've got to not only bring people in town and recognizing that's going to cause gentrification that we have to deal with, but also where permits have already been approved, keep it inside the service area. But where permits have already been approved, demand standards that actually adopt smart urban communities, because these are becoming urban communities. 30,000 units is not a non-urban community anymore. So we have to get smarter about it, make sure it's complemented with transit and transit design, and require that we do mixed communities where you have not only mixed income, but also mixed purpose. Have offices and drugstores and shops inside of the development so that not everybody's going back out to a highway to get what they need. And then develop commuter system alleyways, if you want to call it that, or guideways, so that people can use transit to get where they need to go. Smart urban planning is not that hard to do. We have just not been paying attention to it for a very long time. And I think it's going to take strong leadership on the County Commission Board, who's been paying attention to this issue for the last 10 years, as I have, to make sure that we're holding not only our planners, but FDOT, the county, and the MPO accountable to what the citizens need in Hillsborough County. Thank you.
Awesome. Mark?
So to a lot of folks who might be listening to this broadcast, they might be in the more urban parts of our county, in our city. But we're all running for the Hillsborough County Commission, which is what governs the outside of the boundaries of the city of Tampa. And for those of you that might be listening out in the rural parts of Hillsborough County, you see the problems where bad decision making, bad planning, bad growth decisions have plagued us, and it's really becoming an epidemic. I live in Lithia, and it is amazing the few roads that we have that accommodate tens of thousands of people. And for folks that live in the Fishhawk area that are trying to get their kids to and from school in the morning or in the afternoon, it's absolutely horrible, the commute times, just parents getting their kids to our schools. So our county has an urban service boundary. And what that means is within that urban service boundary are where we have the services, water, sewer, where we have sidewalks, schools, where we have fire and police. Outside of the urban service boundary, we have septic tanks and we have wells for water. And we've got to stop pushing that boundaries, because when we allow growth to happen outside the urban service boundary, then we have to dig deeper into our already empty pockets for the infrastructure that is needed to make those communities whole along with the rest of the county. So we've got to increase the density in our county, because that's going to also help our transit be successful when we implement transportation. I think we have to grow up instead of growing out. We should be growing buildings that are 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 stories tall, that have retail and commercial spaces on the bottom and that have residences above. That's what you see in other communities. But we can't pave our county, we can't pave our state over with asphalt and cement and expect us to have quality of life, expect us to have drinking water, expect us to have services that people come to expect when they pay their taxes. So again, I work for Commissioner Beckner. I was in that space. I'm the only candidate running in this race that has actual Board of County Commission experience, and that is very clearly on my radar as what needs to be addressed and fixed as a Hillsborough County Commissioner.
Thank you. Sky?
I think that we definitely need to ensure that our developers are not getting the okay to build outside of the urban service area. I'm a strong supporter of urban infill. It's happening in other cities around the nation. I visit San Antonio frequent, where we see a lot of urban infill, and it's working. I also want to point out that me being a mother, I have a son who goes to school in West Tampa. I live in Riverview, but I work as a nurse in New Tampa. So I'm waking up at 4:30 every morning to take him to school, to get to work, and then back home again. And for one, it is burdensome, it's stressful, and having to deal with traffic as well as a crowded toll does not help as well, because we're living in one place, working in another, and then shopping in another. So we have to make sure that we're building within that community and capitalizing on urban infill so that we're able to enjoy where we live and not have to drive 20 miles east, 20 miles north, 20 miles south in order to fulfill whatever it is that we're getting ready to do. So that's my thing, is I support urban infill.
Okay.
And wait, before you answer that, we got a very important caller on the line. Caller, are you there? Is the caller there? Caller? Okay, Ray, go ahead and answer.
Thank you. Okay, this is like a big deal for me. I have to say one thing though. I think all of us have had experience working with the Board of County Commissioners. In my job, working 35 years for the Planning Commission, I worked with them and I've seen like 5 generations of different county commissions. Unfortunately, our best one was back in the mid 90s, and we've been just holding on to the advances we made at that point. The urban service area is extremely important. I worked on the initial creation of that. I can tell you that was one of the most difficult things. The developers fought that tooth and nail not to have that. And as bad as sometimes we think Tampa is, go to Orlando or go to some of these other cities. They have unbelievable urban sprawl. At least we have that boundary, and it's pretty much held for 20 years. And we're at the point now where we're getting infill because it isn't that easy to go out, and we shouldn't be going outside of unless there's some major logical reason, but I just don't see that. So we've got to create this infill development, and there's plenty of opportunities. The developers need to just switch. They're not going to be able to build gigantic, 1,000-acre developments. They're going to have to do infill. They're going to have to mix uses, as Kim said. All these things need to take place. Our rules, to me, were good, but they've been a little bit laxly enforced over the last 10 years by the type of commissions we've had.
Okay, we got to cut in and take the.
Hey, caller, can you hear me? We have a very important caller on the line. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very well, Word. This is Chris Limberopoulos. I want to thank each of the candidates for appearing on the show today, and I want to thank you, Kenya, for doing the moderation.
Thank you,
very
Kenya.
well prepared. I'm preparing for the event at 5 o'clock this afternoon. I will see each of you there. And preparation is always the key, whether it's Kenya preparing for the interview and the moderation today, or preparing